been in architecture scene for over 25 years and really knows how to bring projects to life in New York, London, Dubai, and India. He has a unique take on design, sets them apart. So let's start to learn more about Ajay.
Sure, fire away. What would you guys like to know?
So how did it all get started?
I was born? No, I don't know. Let's see. Well, I had an interest in architecture when I was 12 or 13 years old. I grew up in London, and as you're around the house rummaging through things, you realize there's things you want to start tinkering and fixing. My mom's an artist, so I grew up with doing a lot of drawings and art. And as time went on, I started to discover this kind of connection between being creative and understanding the mechanics of small components and parts. So grew up in London, lived in India for about 6 years as well, while going back and forth. And by the time it was time to go to actually study and discover it was architecture that I had to embark on, I went to the US, and that's how I started my career or education, getting a degree in architecture, and then following that, exploring further into the realm of architecture, design, and construction. So
So India, you were born in India.
I was born in London. I grew up in London till I was 12, and then 6 years from 12 to 18 in New Delhi, going to high school there. So again, it was a cultural shift from being in London to being in India, and then being in America when I was 18. So I'm just used to shifting and I guess
Yeah.
working in different parts. And I guess that's how my practice kind of speaks for the variety of exposure we've had over the years. So.
Yeah, my parents are from Holland as well, so I spent some time summers in Holland hanging out with my cousins and whatnot, and they love punk music. So, in London, the punk scene, how was that? How was the punk scene back in London at the time?
Well,
What was that? Was that in the 90s?
yeah, 80s, 90s.
Yeah,
Crazy enough, my dad used to have a clothing shop dedicated during the 80s punk era. So I'd actually go and visit. So that's a lot of my influence of like growing up, being surrounded by different culture, material quality, actually understood a lot about clothing, finishes, textures when by the time I was 10 or 12, understanding how things go together, learning from my father how to sell a product. So these are things that embedded before I was even 12 without even realizing. And then, as you get older, you start to run an architecture business, you realize, oh, wow, these are all these tools I've been learning in different ways that make me comfortable creating
exactly.
architecture as a profession, as a business, and as a creative entity as well at the same time. So,
So it was very nice that your father had a business that was able to get you exposed to that because you do need to know how to sell and know how to talk and when you're meeting clients. So your first job, what was your first project?
oh, my first project, actually, I was going to school at New Jersey Institute of Technology for my bachelor's. And in my third year, I was working at Newark Housing Authority, which is completely non pretty in terms of a profession, but it actually helped me understand basic planning, the red tape behind submission of drawings. And my first year part-time while going to school, university, was doing that. And that kind of started to bleed off further extended understanding between what you study at architecture school and then the real life, so it gave me a good balance. And that was when I was 22,
Right,
probably.
right. 22 years old. Yeah, I was in my 20s when I took my first project on in Manhattan as well. I was pretty innovative up here in the country where I lived. And taking my first steps down Manhattan, doing a loft building. We converted a horse stable into a loft on Perry Street, So I kind of can connect that how you feel about when you were 20 years old and starting your first. So your mentor, you talked about your father and your mother. Who was more of a mentor towards you when you were younger, growing up in London?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'll be honest, I don't think there's been any mentors growing up. I've just been like learning from various like architects and designers. And I think my real understanding of architecture started to happen when I actually got to school and realized, oh, wow, there's a lot to this profession than simple drawings. There's a psychology, there's theory, there's understanding of built materials. And then I think, I'll be honest, by the third year, I actually fell in love with architecture and the possibilities. And so I admire a lot of the minimalist architects that are out there, including the crazy ones that push the limits, like Gehry, to Tado Ando, a Japanese influence.
Nice.
So various architects have actually helped me understand the power of kind of the voice of what architecture can be.
So minimalist. I'm a minimalist. I like minimalist. It's a very difficult construction application, isn't it? There's no tolerances, right? No tolerances at all. You know?
The more minimal, the more harder, I would assume, and the more, like you said, the more mistakes are creeped up with reveal details, shadow gaps,
Yeah,
finesse of plasterwork, wall panel details aligning with doors, and all those things that bring to the forefront of the level of craftsmanship you need and the level of clarity of how materials actually go together. So,
exactly. So with that said, we've done a lot of minimalistic projects as well. We're like I said, shadow beads and reveals and coming up with means and methods because it's delicate. Um, Very delicate application when you're putting, say, a reveal bead against a door with a riglet and this and that. So you really have to know your products and how you put things together. So where your current inspirations that you're working on right now? Where do you get your current inspirations? You just
actually, what's funny? I'm a movie buff, so I love watching movies. I love watching shows. I love watching technology. I also like to see the industry in a different direction, like what Apple does, what Tesla does,
yeah,
industries do, and learn from seeing materials in different ways. And obviously, growing up with clothing, I end up seeing material, texture, and cuts. So whenever we actually embark on a project, we actually try and bring as many different influences to a
right,
project, and then that influence is then conveyed in a way or in a language that the client can actually understand or connect with. So each of our projects are, geared towards the client as well as bringing in some level of influence that's non-traditional architecture. So
well, I saw that you were into wellness, right? Saw part of your website where you're into wellness. What you had a couple of different sections there with comfort and lighting and one getting people comfortable and getting people lit up. You know.
literally. Yeah, I mean, wellness is actually extremely important. And so if we even pan back to that, you spend 80 to 90% of your life inside a building. Whether you like it or not, you're inside some kind of enclosure. And so the importance of the color palette, the softness, the darkness. If the wall is dark, all of a sudden, you'll feel gloomy. There's not enough light. I'm not saying there's no hope, but it's a different experience. And then if you are in a more softer palette of lighter tones, you actually feel brighter. And then when you add this layer of biophilia or greenery, that adds another layer of emotional connection or another sensory has awoken up, and then you feel excited by, feeling better by seeing plants. So comfort, in wellness is critical. Comfort in actually every aspect of design is critical from every sector. And as we design space, we actually try to bring that level of comfort versus the completely sterile, ultra minimal approach, because that's actually not sustainable on some level.
Right. It sounds very interesting. So when you're meeting a client for the first time and you need to find out how comfortable they want to be, how do you go about dragging that information out of them? How do you find out, client A, wants to redo a 3,000 square foot apartment and you find, so how do you interview them and know what kind of flavors and kind of design they really want so that you're not pushing something they don't really want to do?
Well, I mean, each client is different. So if we did take the example of a 3,000 square foot apartment in New York City, and if it was a couple, I would obviously first start would be obviously getting them on the phone and understanding what their needs are, actually trying to really listen to them because without trying to form an interpretation that, hey, this is what you should do, it's good to understand what their kind of goals are for the apartment, what their
Right.
language is of what they think minimalism is versus what I think minimalism is,
Exactly.
how their approach to what have they done an apartment renovation before? Have they been involved in construction? What layer have they worked with contractors before? And so trying to get a general basis of their tolerance level before even approaching them with a design saying, hey, this is what you should do. And even prior to that, we would actually spend a lot of time trying to understand the plan. If they're a husband and wife and they have a kid or they have another kid on the way, which seems to happen a lot,
Right.
you have to figure out how that planning how that plan works for them, and how best in the future say the children do get older, is there room comfortable for them at that age versus rebuilding it? So we try and work on projections of how you would live in that apartment the next 5 to 10 years, or are you looking to just live there 7 years, outgrow it, and move on? Um, and then design does come into play. And then that's a whole other layered factor of them providing inspirational mood boards or images. Nowadays, clients have a lot of visual information floating around that piques their interest. So we start to understand what language, what words they use to describe it. And we kind of do like what we call a psych test, but with imagery through them and ask them their likes and dislikes. And that's allows us to be more comfortable presenting an idea when we do, you know.
So, so you have a like a checklist that you go through, a questionnaire for them, or it's just basically phone interviews and meetings. And how do you get to your first sketch? You know, because you have to know kind of know what they do like, because otherwise you're just throwing darts in the air, right?
I think what we usually suggest to them is, firstly, obviously they're coming to us because they've seen our work on the website and there's something that's drawn them to some of our work. So we ask, have you seen our website? Is there anything you like or anything that you are drawn to that you feel your apartment would like to be a part of or something? And that's the first step. So once we gauge that information, that's actually a good start. Then what we do is we do a series of interviews with questionnaires on the basics of your growth, is your family going to grow? How large does someone really cook in New York City? Who cooks out of both of you? Then we know who the focus is on a kitchen when it comes to meticulousness or when it comes to closet space. And if it's the husband or the wife or a partner or the other, we then try and gauge where each one's focus is on. And then we try to get to an understanding with their ideas and thoughts, and then collectively create like a mood board of a starting point, not to pin them down, but just to, it's like a warm-up cycle. You go
Right.
through that, and then that will allow you to then hone into design and aspects later on.
Yeah, I work with lots of architects, so I see those mood boards, I see materials, and I'm just like, how do you guys blend these materials? How do you know this color goes with this color? Because my wife says to me, "Don't you know what color goes with?" I said, "Sue, I see so many different colors. I see so many different things. I don't even know what I like, what I don't like anymore. You know, it's just." But they take us for granted, right? Clients do take us for granted. The knowledge that you have to be able to put that into three-dimensional for them, right? All those colors and selections that you do. Um, and what I mean by taking this for granted, sometimes budget constraints, do they, are we a charity? I mean, I've heard that, I'm a charity sometimes too. People don't realize the cost of things, cost effective, eye appealing materials. I mean, there's materials you can use that are, a lot less expensive to get a really good look. And that's a hard blend. So how do you kind of bring those costs, into a client that you don't know how much wants to spend right now, whether it's $500 a square foot, $800 a square foot, $1,000 a square foot? How do you get that temperature on what they want to spend? So that way, when you are bidding out the project, you're not going back to redesign because you have to value engineer.
No, I mean, those are like actually I guess this is part of the industry we're in. We're dealing with the back and forth for the multi-layered expectation from the client that when we draw something, it's going to be $400 a square foot when it actually is $600 a square foot. So what we do is tell them, here's a gauge between 4 to 600, and the project could vary based on unforeseen conditions. If we do a competitive bid, which is typically what we do, it allows the client a realistic expectation of where the project could go towards.
Right.
Uh, and then at times we have them understand that, look, and I agree with you, I'm at the same position. I design actually, strange enough, I design in two ways. I design what the client needs and then also what I would do that would be cost effective at the same time. Because a material could be $30 a square foot, but a reasonably nice one could be $10 a square foot. And then you have to show them the pros and cons. And strangely enough, in most cases, the client will pick the most expensive product. It will skew the budget, but then you help them realize that there's a pro and con of using, compact material or some other, man-made material versus, marble or quartz or granite. So,
Right.
it's a balancing act, and that's kind of like the fun part of the profession for me. I actually enjoy every aspect of architecture, so I might be not the as much as our office loves design, we also love to figure out how this design can meet a budget, meet a timeline, meet constraints, and
Yeah.
all those factors is what makes it a good product in the end, or a good project that you're able to kind of weave in and out to create the right balance so that
Right.
both contractor doesn't go nuts, the client's happy, and then you're hopefully on budget and on schedule within reason, So
That sounds very very intelligent, and I tell you,
I try.
I'm impressed, because I work with a lot of architects, and sometimes that doesn't come into play. They only know a couple of aspects of the trade, Um, Design over function, function over design. I love those two words. How many times does that come into play? How do you balance function over design when someone wants something to be tall door, they don't want it thick, and you're worried about warpage and they're going to use it a lot, and it looks good, but so that design over function, how do you manage that process?
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Our first focus is function. If the
Right.
plan doesn't work and the layout doesn't work, you can design the hell out of it and it still won't make any difference. Because in the long run, things can look pretty, but if they're not working right, in construction, there's warpage, there's wood materials. If the wood is too tight and there's expansion and contraction, then you're automatically going to deal with an issue a year from now, and the contractor's upset. Like I warned everyone, or materials like onyx used on countertops, which I would never do, but clients have
Yeah.
done that.
Yeah.
And then you have to put this
Very
disclaimer,
brittle.
like we're
Onyx
not,
is very brittle.
huh?
Onyx is very brittle, right?
Yes, and
Mesh.
it's been used on a recent project where I actually had to write a letter like we're not responsible. The contractor wrote a letter, we're not responsible. But it's for us to notify that like these are products we do not recommend, even though clients are
Yep.
sometimes insistent. So you just have to keep an open mind. I like plans to work to like perfection. Like they have to work. If they don't, no design can save them, in my opinion. But I do love design, so there is always a level of finesse that can go into design. And that's when things, obviously, the space planning flows well. And then it's also designed with that layer of aesthetic that matches the client. Obviously, with design, there's a fine line between design and decoration. And then decoration just is more of an adage depending on who is actually creating it. And that's a whole other layer of, design over function aspect. Um,
So if you had to just make a statement and say, what does it take to be a successful architect in New York City? I know you done work all over the place, but in New York City, what does it take to be, uh, one word, what does it take to be successful in New York City? What's the word you would use? So I'll tell you the word I would use if I were you, but
hmm.
what does it take to be successful in New York? Right?
I don't want to use the word, but I have to look for another word right now.
You know what? We can edit things out if it starts getting crazy,
No, I'm just trying to think of another one. Um, I don't know. I think, yeah, after saying all this, I actually haven't, you know what? You have to have, I can't put it down. Maybe I'll describe it. You have to have a lot of, will.
A lot of drive, right?
Yeah, a lot of
A
drive,
lot of resilience,
resilience, will, drive,
patience.
patience. And there's so many weird, extreme level of patience, rigor, you need a lot of that into one, to even survive. And New York City is a competitive market. It's an extraordinarily
Yeah.
crazy competitive market, but you have to learn a lot of different skills that you thought, oh, I'm fine. I'm an architect. I can create. I know how to present myself. But the competition outweighs that whole aspect as well. And
Is it terrible that that takes place? That competition is really kind of changed, or it changes how we can approach certain projects. Imagine if the competition was a little bit less, how much more freelance we could be and how much more we could offer clients.
yeah, I agree. I mean, so there's various aspects. Like architecture is a completely brutal environment. I'm sure construction is as well, because I'm actually learning a whole other aspect of construction. But architecture is brutal because, we are beaten down with numbers, and the discussions, the first set of numbers a client receives is from an architect most likely. And it's even if it's like $50,000 and the project is a $400,000, their first line is that I'm not paying you this much money. And so then you have to explain to them your value, the importance of it, the idea that our $50,000 is actually worth nothing if you have a poor design and you spend $700,000. So a lot of it for me is about educating the client about the importance of the profession and how you are different. And how we are different is actually we are very clear. We are involved in architecture, design, all the paperwork in the building department. We also involved in construction. I've run projects under construction management. And so all of a sudden they've learned to become excited because when we do hire a contractor or they do, we're able to like be on the same page and clear on budget and costs. And
Right.
we've run numbers for every project. We have tables like crazy for every project. So we can run the project cost ourselves and then bring a contractor in. The client doesn't feel shell shocked with a budget. And then we can then recommend, the pros and cons working with each contractor. So, and that we've got a lot of projects that way. I mean, clients have excited. They're like, why should I go to a contract? I'm going to go through you. And then you can manage that entire construction process with a contractor. So it's not full on design build, but we're kind of tiptoeing in that area from time to time.
So you're actually doing some pre-construction stuff that we actually do as well. We
Yes.
try to get clients to hire us without going to bid. So we offer them a process where we go through the conceptual design along with you from day one, and we price things out, parallel. So that way you don't just you draw, like I said, and you come back. Now you have to go back with three bids and revisit and cut prices. So we have a system as well in place where we try to work parallel with you and the client and work right to the budget. So we design and we may say to you, hey, listen, you picked out this onyx stone and walnut cabinets, and this is pricing out at 150, and we need to get this down to 80. So we change the stone and we change the cabinetry, and then that helps bring the budget in line. So at the end, we have a budget the client likes and a design they like, and then we're married. That's how I like to work as well. So it's great you have that. Um,
I actually like that a lot. And we actually like contractors to be some, and I agree with you. I've had this approach where a contractor comes to us, gives us the client, and says, hey, can you please figure out what the client wants? And then we'll price the job. But then when we're trying to actually have them work with us, it depends on their time and the willingness and the scale of the project. And if a project's too small, say $500,000, the importance factor weighs in on time when they're trying to capture larger projects. And so
right.
the larger projects, they obviously contractors get more excited. So,
Yeah, I mean,
and
we have a
so do
small project. We
architects,
have a small project division, so it doesn't matter to us. We put the time in.
Yep.
We don't mind. We like working close, because then the bigger project always shows up later on anyway. So, and bigger projects are always not better. They're always not the better scene. So building your team. I mean, I don't know how big your team is, but just building a team. How did you build your team?
Well, we're a small office, what they call a boutique office, but we're pretty efficiently run. I have 5 employees. Uh, one's a senior project manager, another one's a project manager, and then three are junior architects. And
Yeah,
they all have architecture backgrounds. So the team has grown based on the scale of projects over time. They shrink, and then, right now we're at 5 and we're looking to grow. So that's kind of where we are right now. And for me, it's good to have a great like project manager or someone that understands construction. So my main project manager actually has a good construction background. So it's
right.
not just drawing for the sake of drawing. So he's heavily technical, which makes my life a lot easier on things where I do not want to focus on as much. So,
I mean, do you
uh,
see do you see things starting to open up a little bit? Because it was a little quiet the last
well,
quarter. Everybody was sitting locked down and hands folded, seeing what's going on with the world and whatnot. And I think things have changed now, and we're hopefully things will get a little bit busier. Are you seeing a little bit more activity?
yeah, I'm seeing a lot more activity. For me, the actual thing, and I think I probably might have discussed this with you at some point, but what it was is that ours was a pretty much predominantly 90%, 85% commercial,
Right.
50% residential. And then COVID hit, and our last project finished just before COVID. So for 2 years, we actually had a slim level of work, and I had to maintain an office on like a shoestring budget.
Yep.
And then as COVID kind of freed up a little, if you want to call it, we started going more into residential, and now we're like at 85% residential, 15% commercial. And since then, we've had to develop this even greater level of patience because now more of our clients are residential. But it's actually been fun. So our projects are actually progressing from residential, commercial to warehouse. We're doing a two-story building, and we're doing some project in Pennsylvania, and then we're also working on a hotel project right now. So our exposure is still wide and it's growing, and
So are you right now anything on the boards? Are you drawing residential projects right now? Are you in the midst of designing any residential projects?
two of the projects are under construction, two of the apartments. Warehouse is under construction with a contractor. Hotel where it's through another contractor. So again, I mean, actually, the if we had to even flip back, how I got some of my initial work was through a contractor,
Right.
and that's where it became the growth of how Echo started in 2011, where some of our earlier projects were from construction, and I started to get along maybe better with contractors than clients, and then contractors were, "Hey, do you want to work on this project?" And it's because we actually focus on like a schedule, a timeline. Drawings are really tight so they can price it and then they're actually
Right.
happy. It actually makes everyone's life a lot easier. So yeah, currently, strangely, I didn't, yeah, they're all indirectly contractor or an interior designer actually wanted us to work on a project as the architect of record. So our projects have scattered and they're varied from being architect of record to interior designer to just to get involved in all levels. So our roles change based on projects. So we keep an open mind when projects come in, and it becomes fun because we end up collaborating with interior designers or solely as the architect and interior designer on a project. So
So you're super versatile. So the two residential projects that you got going on are what scale are they?
one's scale, one's 2 bedroom and the other one is a 3 bedroom. And they're small renovation projects.
Right.
And then tomorrow I'm looking at some other projects in a building. So
Right.
so
I'm heading down to the city myself to look at a project tomorrow. Pretty exciting.
let me
Um,
know when you're down there. Get coffee.
yeah, with the heavy rail, we'll definitely meet up.
Yeah.
So you said you wanted to grow. And I know that today's world is tough. It's tough to find some good people. Everybody, there's the kids out there today are different. Everyone's a little different. A lot of things have changed in our world. So how do you cultivate talents and how are you going to find your talents,
Actually, we've been very lucky, and I don't know what it is that the start of every year we do put an ad out for hiring an architecture with various skill level, and as the
Right.
year floats around, we do get variety of resumes. So I'm always on the lookout for talent of someone that is either graduating or has design experience in the architecture profession and has some interest. And so we get a lot of resumes that come in. We used to hire students from Columbia, from Pratt, and so and we're on probably some list that for some reason we keep getting a lot of resumes throughout the last, I don't know, 10 years or so, 10 plus years. So
You keep cultivating by just advertising and
yes.
if someone comes along, you grab them, right?
Oh
Give them a
yeah.
shot.
And strange enough, my last employee, I looked at about 100 resumes, and even though I had every resume categorized in a folder for various levels, what strangely happened was it was like, oh, I'm looking for someone, and the resume shows up as just being listed. And I go, this person is perfect. I'm like, so I just call the person, and now the person's been working with us for the last 3 months or so. So sometimes it's just random or at the right place at the right time. You manage to find a person that connects and actually has better skill set than you expect. And then you're like, I don't know, I'm grateful. Some of my employees, I appreciate my employees, a lot.
Right. It's great. So what about a nightmare client? Have you had a nightmare client?
A nightmare without
I
saying
mean,
any. Yeah.
you got into working with a client and they come across and all of a sudden during the course of construction, I don't know if something happens in their life or something changes, but they just become difficult and don't like what they see because a lot of people can't see 3 dimensions. They have to wait to see it when it's already done. So just, I mean, I know you had many, many great clients, but I'm just asking who was your
Yeah,
nightmare client?
I guess it's ebbs and flows with a client. They go through their own emotional aspects that are unrelated to the project, and then they dump their emotions or frustration onto the either you, the architect, or the contractor. And it's happened where, like, I'll be honest, I'm working on a project, highly complex, and all of a sudden, in the middle of the project, I get a call, "You're fired." And I went, "What did I do?" And then 3 hours later, "Oh, you're okay, you're back." I was upset. And I went, "What?" I said, "Oh, because I lost money in the stock market in that few hours that was pretty much worth the project and then got
Oh,
gained it back." So
you
you're,
were on the emotional roller
yeah. And
coaster, financial
so,
roller coaster.
I mean, so we have a variety of clients. They're celebrities, they're finance guys, they're fintech,
Yep.
tech, they're creatives. And so you just hang in and just be patient and polite and do the best you can. And hopefully, you know, uh, you don't get tossed over. I mean, we've had another project. We actually did the entire plans. The drawings were fine. It was a brownstone in Brooklyn, brand new building.
Right.
And then the client decided, "Oh, I just don't like you." And I'm like, "Can you provide us a reason?" I said, "No, I don't have a reason." So you get fired on a project. But then they
Unbelievable.
use your design to build a project. So sometimes you cannot gauge,
Yep.
and sometimes it's just a personality clash or their own frustration. But the goal is, I'm an architect. I have to maintain professionalism. I have to be polite and pretty much just be clear and put my foot down where I need to put my foot down that affects what's going on or what my code of ethic of doing the right thing is. So I try and stick to that as best as possible.
So how do you, all this New York City stuff is great and it's complicated. I know because I work in multiple places too. I work in Costa Rica and I also work in Miami, South Beach, Florida, in that area. So we have a division down there as well. How do you do with Dubai? I mean, I see you got some decent project. It's a
Yeah,
long flight. It's hot, you know.
so, I mean, Dubai was actually lucky because a lot of it was done remotely. So one of my clients that we met about 10 years ago decided to open up a project in New Delhi, and we did it remotely while he was struggling to find exactly what he was looking for. And we kind of finished it in a weekend. And he's like, "Oh." And then he's like, "Well, I have this house in Dubai. It's 15,000 square feet. I fired one architect. The other architect was a developer, could not solve a bathroom. This is how strange our projects can happen. Can you solve a master bathroom suite?" And these are the plans this other architect did. They did 5 plans. I said, this is not going to work. We create a layout. He's like, "You know what? You already did my other project. Can you help me on the rest of this, please?" And it became one of those, engagements where a small aspect that you solve for them helps them realize that, "Hey, I've already worked with you before. Can you just help me renovate the rest of this entire house?"
Beautiful.
And it's just because we don't worry about scale of project. The project is too small or too large. It's more
Yep.
about relationships. It's more about, can you get along with this person? And
Right.
are you guys on the same page are we on the same page when we're working together? And there's a mutual level of respect. And once that is there, I'm happy. Like, we work on all kinds of projects. I don't really
Yeah. No,
kind of look.
if there's a good symmetry, then it's a wonderful,
Yeah,
wonderful
it's
place to
it's
be.
it's it's and it's the crazy part is, like you said, if you have a crazy client, it leaves a bad taste for the next 7, 8 months of construction, or
Right.
it could
Right.
leave a bad taste in the first year, depending on how your contract is structured. So,
Exactly.
your client relationships are good, and there's a respect and some kind of like fairness involved for the value of your time. Then it's easy for you to actually do the work, and your employees not to feel like, they're either insulted by the client or the client said these really crude emails once in a while. And if you get none of that,
Right.
one feels comfortable to do the work. It's a lot of labor, like you even know, doing those drawings, thinking of every detail, and making sure certain things are not missed so they're priced properly. And so we focus on making sure we have a good client we're working with.
And what about the workforce in Dubai? I see Dubai. It's building. It's all over the place.
Oh,
They do some remarkable things. They do some scary stuff that I was like, whoa, how do they do that? And but so the workforce down there and the quality. And
yeah.
what about the language barrier?
Yeah, I don't think there's much of a language. There's usually what there is a lot of large companies that are already stationed there,
Right.
that already have like large real estate broker firms that have divisions that exist there that provide contractors or other teams that can produce the same level of work. And for us, it's very simple. Even when we did work in New York, or I mean, work in London or even in India or wherever it is, drawings are drawings and they will convey the information. And everything's in English, so it's pretty straightforward. So we get a set of drawings, we can easily review it. It's the same language. And that allows us to convey, like, "Oh, yeah, these drawings are fine for this stair." And they provide shop drawings and we're able to review it. Like, this detailing looks good. great. Please build it and let us know if there's any issues. And luckily the client we had a lot of a good design sensibility as well,
Right.
which actually helped. And he's done a lot of construction projects. So he just needed someone's guidance, which was us for that project. So, but it's
Right.
always,
So getting back to let's say, the meats and the bones of the project, like after you're through with design, you meet a client, you design, and they finally say, this is what we're moving forward with. And you got a set of construction drawings, you got the permits, and you're ready to go. You got your contractor on board, and you're working. And a change order, what we call, I don't like change orders. I don't like to call them, I'd like to call them additional work orders or AWRs, because change orders has a bad name. It's like, it's sort of like there's a nasty name, change. Everybody wants to charge B change orders. To realize the most of the change orders come, three different ways, right? Unforeseen condition could be a change order. The client, well, there's four. The client will change something, or the
yes.
architect wants to change something, or the GC says, oh man, you know what? I forgot those five doors. So there's a process to try to get that by, right? Without saying to the client, oh, I'm not paying for that. I'm not paying for this. I'm not paying for that. So how do and I work with architects, like I work with architects like you every day, and I try not to come up with any change orders, especially if we forgot something, I usually eat that. But, if an architect says, hey, listen, I didn't realize that wall, should be shifted over 3 inches. We kind of play nice in the sandbox when it comes to that stuff. But when clients are changing materials, or they say, I don't like the way that tile really came out, but you selected it, or so there's sometimes some aggravation that takes place in a project when that happens. It kind of turns the mood around.
Yeah, I mean, look, I mean, we always warn the client that, look, if the drawings are not done correctly, if we haven't reviewed all the finishes and materials and you haven't done enough mock-up studies prior to construction, things will happen that are not unforeseen conditions. So what we end up doing is helping them understand that, like, these things could happen. Just be aware we leave our own contingency in place. We also The crazy part, if the client does change the material unexpectedly, we have the pros and cons. Well, if you did this would cost this much, and this is no fault because we did not discuss this. So we're pretty frank with the client about those things. If it's relating to doors that are on the job, and I understand that, like, technically, if it's a contract you paid for the drawings. But on the other end, if I was the architect and I had to move a wall 3 inches over and I didn't catch it before framing started, then I would feel bad, and then there'll be a bit of give and take with the contractor. Because you
Right.
have to be fair, and I've been through the whole cycle. I spent like a year and a half, 2 years with design build. So while I'm trying to control a trade and they don't show up or do, and something's missed, and then it escalates, and then the contracts that eat up all the other issues that happen, I'm a little more lenient towards things happening because things will happen. There are a lot of trades involved, but you get paid general conditions, overhead, profit for a reason. But
Right.
I'm pretty fair when it comes to trying to figure out what's best, as long as we're on schedule and the client's not,
So
completely driving
you,
up
so you,
crazy.
so you said you work with celebrities. I work with celebrities too, and I work with, financial people. So if someone said to you, listen, you can have your dream client, who would you want to do the next project for? Like
Oh,
your, your, uh, your celebrities, which one would you like to, not even a celebrity, who would you want to work for next? If someone came up to you and said, listen, you have a choice to work with this one, this one, this one, who would it be?
actually,
You mentioned a couple names in the beginning of our podcast.
actually, not. I thought there would have been maybe 5 years ago there would have been some dream client, but now it doesn't. It actually doesn't affect like what client is. It's the client of the character of the client versus what their background is. And so once you've done a whole range of clients, you actually just realize that you just want someone that you comfortably respects and push the limits of design with you,
Right.
and is excited on a creative level, and just wants something that they are wholly appreciative of. And that's the general client for me, and I'll be happy with that. I'm
Yeah.
not worried about names and all that. That's just been there,
Yeah.
done that. It's kind of like
I
that.
just
Once you've gone through it,
interesting people like, you mentioned Elon Musk. I would love to do in an
Oh
apartment for
yeah,
Elon
Elon Musk
Musk,
would. I
talk with
wouldn't
him
mind
and see
Elon
what,
Musk,
see what kind of electronics he would put. Some
but
robots would come into the, and help me work,
but then you'll be working 150 hours a week per person, and he will grind you to the ground. And
He'll
maybe
grind you to the ground.
so
I would really like to feel his work ethic. I like to be around him for a week and see if that's really how he operates, because that would be challenging, right? To really see how he, if that's how he really is,
it's like
Um,
saying, well, I work for Steve Jobs, and everyone has pros and cons about working for crazy geniuses, and there's a price to pay for working for that type
yep,
A personality. I'm more interested in, yeah, the whole idea of if anyone's famous. I actually don't get phased anymore. It doesn't matter. I mean,
yeah,
someone else's apartment and he was a billionaire, and I told him like, no, I can't do the project for that price, and he was upset at me, and I'm like, well,
yep.
I don't know, I don't care,
Well,
doesn't
maybe
bother.
I misinterpret. I wanted to say interesting, like
Interesting, yeah. I think
interesting.
more interesting. The more interesting the client, the better. The more client that's trying to push an idea but is also focused. Uh,
Right,
Slightly less focused will create a disruption for the entire office, if we're working on a large project with the client. So the more focused, the
right,
more appreciative and understanding would be more ideal. Unless if he's, you know, paying crazy money, even that will still create a disruption. And so that in the end doesn't even help me as well, especially the sanity of my employees. We actually work from 9 to 6. I don't work them beyond 40 hours. I tell them you're done.
Fridays
And
off sometimes, summer
yeah,
hours,
yeah,
Fridays
yeah. And
off.
if they have and employees have like personal things, just let me know. We'll just move the schedule around. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world.
Exactly.
There's a quote from Oscar Niemeyer. They interviewed him. They asked him if architecture is important, and he said, "No, life is important." So,
Exactly.
it's something like that along those lines. And I value, my employees' time to like actually cool off, after work, so that they can actually come back focused,
Yep.
and that's important for me.
Has to
So,
be fun. Has to be fun. Work
yeah,
hard, work hard, play hard, right?
if you can, without getting
Hard,
injured,
my
without
motto
getting
too.
injured.
Hard
I'm
now,
kidding.
easy.
Playing
Hard now,
sports.
easy later.
Yes, whatever connotation you want to use would work. So,
So, hobbies. What are some of your hobbies? Free time.
um, when COVID hit, so I stopped drawing for about 25 years. I was drawing architecture. And I mentioned my mom's an artist, but I grew up drawing till I was 18. So when COVID hit, I just started drawing. And that's probably the most shocking thing that could have happened to me, that I didn't know I could draw so much more better after not drawing for 25 years. But COVID allowed me to just draw for 6 to 8 hours a day, and it created not saying another revenue stream, but it created a stream where I'm working on a project I renovate, and the client's like, "Can I buy your art as well?" So I'm like, "Okay, here's ink art I've done." And then recently, in the last 3, 4 years, but more important, last 6 months, I've been focusing on piano, learning how to read sheet music and play, which
Wow.
my age gets very tough, but it helped me realize my dyslexia, my paraphasia, my confusion of words and letters. Uh,
Yes.
and it's a brilliant thing because it actually helped me focus more clearly with other aspects of how I'm seeing things differently. So a blessing in many ways, because now I play a piece of Beethoven, and even the first few notes, and I'm like in heaven for some reason. I don't
Wow.
know. So
That's very cool. Yeah, that's very cool too. It's a great outlet, right? It's a beautiful outlet. I love music as well.
yeah, music.
My father played the accordion and I was just mesmerized and I just never picked up on, I was very hyper and still am, and ADHD and all that kind of stuff. So I'd love to be able to play the piano, but I think my fingers are too big.
Fine. Just practice.
So
Start with
that's so your hobby is playing the piano. You
yeah,
any kind of sports, you
yeah.
like skiing and in the winter, like
So I do play cricket. Played cricket in high school, and then I took a break and discovered cricket is pretty heavily played a sport in the US, and the US actually has a cricket team. And my friend plays in the cricket team, US cricket team.
wow,
Actually a big thing. And used to play.
that's an interesting sport.
Yeah, and it's a great level. It's called the chess of sports because it is tactically brilliant. It's like field positions are 360 instead of a quadrant like in baseball.
Right.
So I've been playing it. I took last year off, but I'm gonna be back next season.
Wow.
So that when I have time, I actually we can go back to that because that's actually a full-on fitness level you need to be at. And I'm playing with 20-year-olds, so it's like a different level of expectation. So,
And
but it's
what about the crazy world of pickleball? I mean, I mean,
pickleball. I started like 2 years ago, but I only played in Maui. My friend has a place there with a tennis court, and we played, and
fun, right?
was fun and it was interesting because everyone's like, "Oh, do you know how to play? Have you played?" I'm like, "No, it's hand-eye coordination. I
Yeah,
played sports my whole life. I play all kinds of sports.
yeah.
Played tennis before, so I'm like, oh, okay, this is fun. It's exciting. I'm not sure if I will continue it because I'm either playing cricket or I play ping pong instead, which is
Yeah,
fun for
ping
me.
pong. Ping pong's a great sport.
That's actually great for your mental agility and your reflexes. So it's actually good in multiple levels when you're playing a sport, even like ping pong. So
Amazing, amazing. So Ajay, it was a pleasure, man. I really enjoy that
cool.
you came on the show, and it was great speaking with you. I learned a lot about what you do, and it's nice to hear that we have the same kind of thought process when it comes to meeting clients and building things. So I like to meet you in person. You know, I'll be in the city next couple of weeks, next month, whatever we can find some time, maybe grab a cup of coffee, see each other face to face, and see if there's any opportunities for both of us. You know, I have opportunities for you, you have opportunities for me, and yeah, that's sort of where it's at. If any other questions for me?
No, I mean I appreciate this jumping onto this podcast. I haven't done one at all, so I usually was like, why not? Is kind of the
Sure.
approach. It's actually funny we're talking about things that actually help you. I've been reading a lot. So Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday has like changed a lot for the thinking of doing things without actually worrying about it.
Yep.
But for me, it's actually a pleasure. Like we chatted, we're along I agree, we're along the same page of kind of understanding the importance of what you're trying to provide versus the ego driven, is it this or that versus actually just trying to do the right thing.
Yep.
And yeah, I'd love to meet, have coffee or grab lunch or whatever, whenever you're in the city, and we can talk about how we can work together because I'm sure there's a way. Where there's a will, there's a way. There you go. I'll
And
leave you with a
you want
quote.
to know something? We'll probably do this show again, and we'll circle
Sure.
back and after we have a couple more projects, we'll be able to explain how we got through a couple of things. But yeah, it was great. I really appreciate your time, and it was fun. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.